Fear Not, episode 116. Hi, I'm Billy Atwell, and I believe that consistently facing your fears is the only way to realize your truest self and to make those confident choices that will help you to obtain your deepest held hopes and dreams. I have faith that this podcast series will show you that you are not alone, that it will strengthen you and give you courage to face your fears, and that it will help you to permanently cross over into a life of living beyond your fears. Join me on this journey as we listen and learn from others as they share their experiences in facing and overcoming their own fears. Hello, everybody. Today, you and I are going to be joined by bkempton. Welcome, Beth. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Billy. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. At heart, Beth is a wanderer, an adventurer, and a seeker of beauty. Her life story is a catalog of wild and crazy experiences that she wouldn't believe if she hadn't been there herself, such as hosting her own TV show in Japan, traveling on a private jet with the world's most famous football team, or surviving falling off a cliff on a quad bike. But these things didn't come about because of any kind of special privilege or personal wealth. They happened because she followed her intuition, made bold choices, and sought out freedom every step of the way. And sometimes she just got lucky. For the past 7 years, she has run a company called Do What You Love, which produces and delivers online courses which have helped thousands of people in over 70 countries worldwide to design a life that makes them happy. She's also the author of Freedom Seeker, Live More, Worry Less, Do What You Love, a book that speaks to the frustrations and challenges of an entire generation trapped by the pressures of modern life. Beth, can you take a few moments to fill in those gaps and maybe also give us a brief glimpse of your personal life?
Of course, and thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to dive deeper into the really important topics in life. I think what you do in the world is really, really important, and fear is something that stops so many people, all of us, I think, in some way, from doing what it is we love. And when we do what we love, that's better for the world. So if we could all deal with our fear in better ways, I think the world would benefit. So in terms of filling in the gaps, I think the most important thing to say actually is that when you're reading my bio there, sometimes I hear those things and it sounds like somebody else. Less so these days, but if you'd spoken to me 3 years ago, I think they would have felt like a really distant memory, because the truth is, in my 20s, I was incredibly bold and brave. I would go anywhere, talk to anyone, do anything. And that's how I got to have so many really amazing experiences, never to do with having any more money than any average person, but always because I jumped at opportunities, I traded my services, I was, up for whatever was going to make an adventure work. And I think as I've got older, in some ways that has become harder. As I have taken on more responsibilities in work and family life, it's definitely become more challenging. And since I had children, I have 2 daughters. They're still very small, but that has definitely, for a while, really, really changed me in many ways, but also in terms of how brave and bold I was, I think, with approaching my life. And the reason I wrote Freedom Seeker actually was not because I've spent many years helping people to do what they love. It was because I found myself in a situation where I wasn't doing what I loved after many years of helping other people to do it. And that came about because I just took on so much in my life. My life was changing very fast with the arrival of these 2 children. And I really hadn't stopped to think about what I was doing, really. I was running a business that I really loved, that was going really well. And I guess on the outside, everything probably looked perfect, but I felt really trapped. And when you feel trapped, you're inside this cage, which is dark and small, and you can't see all of the big opportunities out in the world. And in some ways it feels safe, because you can't go very far, you can't venture very far. But it's really a very, very dangerous place to be, because you miss out on life, if you allow yourself to be trapped within the life that you've built. So I had a particular moment, which I'm happy to talk about, that really brought that home to me and made me realize that I was doing nobody any kind of service by being a really small version of myself. And the last 2 or 3 years have really been an investigation into what happened, and how I can get back to that brave, bold, adventurous person I used to be. And I'm definitely very far along compared to where I was 3 years ago, and I'm very much back into the old attitude of let's give it a go and see where we get, and put myself out there. And I think one of the things that happened with writing Freedom Seeker that I was kind of naively not really expecting, was that I would have to put myself out in the world in a way that I haven't before. When you become a published author with a publisher like Hay House, you can't just write the book and send it in and then wait for the royalties to roll. It's very much a public job. You have to speak on big stages, and you get the opportunity to do wonderful things like podcast interviews and talk to fascinating people to spread your word. But the first time you see a website with your name on it, with a big picture of you on it, talking all about you, if that's not what you're used to, it's a very strange thing. It can be a terrifying thing. And all of the things that you wanted because you wanted to write a book are often things that you didn't realize scare you. And you have to learn all over again how to be bold in different ways, in new arenas. And it's been a real learning curve for me for the last 3 years. So I would say that's the missing piece in the bio. But it means that all the lessons are very fresh to me. And I feel alive again, which is the most important thing.
Beth, we have a tradition here on the show for our Friday Specialist show where we start off with having you give us a definition of what fear is. So would you do that for us today?
I like to keep it light because I think we make the word fear heavy enough ourselves. So I would say that fear is information. And as with any information, it can be a helpful thing and it can be a dangerous thing. It can be a facilitator or it can be an obstacle. So I think if you try and think about fear just as it's information, then you can decide what you do with that information, which can really help you avoid being ruled by the fear. So for example, I think often we all know what it feels like in our bodies when we're afraid of something. And there's obviously all sorts of things you can be afraid of. There's real and present physical danger, all the way through to, well, what if I do X then and Y happens? Through to what is that person going to think or whatever. There's a whole spectrum of things that we're afraid of, and some of them are rational and some of them are not. But if you can think of fear just as information, when you feel it in your body, that same old thing you always get, the hunched shoulders or the tight stomach or the feeling of being sick or whatever it is, it might be that that information is telling you that you need to listen because you're in danger. It's a very important, very historical reason for us to have the sense of fear. It might be telling you you need to listen because this is something that you really, really care about and you need to pay attention to. That's certainly the case, for example, with fear around creativity. Often it's only the things that you really, really care about, like showing your painting to a public audience. Absolutely terrifying the first time you do it, but it's only terrifying because you care about it so much. And that is really important information for finding out your life's purpose and the best road for you. So I think looking at fear as information can really change the gravitas that you give it, and it can make you grateful for it because it's saying, okay, I'm listening to you. I'm not necessarily going to allow you to make my decisions for me, but I may take what you're telling me and use that to help me follow the breadcrumbs on this trail of my life.
Beth, with all the experience that you've had, what could you share with us today that would help us to become more brave and bold so that fear doesn't prevent us from living our fullest life?
The $1 million question. I knew you were going to ask me the $1 million question. It's all a choice. I think that's what it comes down to. We can, that every single day, there are big and small ways that we can choose to be bold or choose to be meek, that we can choose to be brave and courageous, or we can choose to stay buried and hidden because of fear. And remember that so often fear is just conjecture. It might be based on actual experience. It might be based on what rumors that we've heard. It might be just based on our imagination. But the actual particular fear, any fear in any given moment, is never 100% fact, because it's always based on the future, and we do not know the future. And so for me, when I'm feeling really nervous about doing something, knowing deep in my gut that I need to do something, but it's really terrifying, I try and make it really practical, really logical. I try and understand what exactly it is that is stopping me. And then I try and understand what is the cost of that. So say for example, I can't tell you the gifts that writing Freedom Seeker have brought to me. Was I terrified of sending my proposal out? Oh yeah. Was I terrified when I got called to go and meet with various publishers and talk about my book just a few weeks after having a baby with baby brain and not being able to complete a sentence? Oh yeah. Was I terrified about my story being out in the world the day that it got published? Oh yeah. But each time I thought to myself, what is the cost of not doing this? So in the first instance, if I don't send my proposal out, if I send my proposal out in the world, the worst thing that's going to happen is nobody is going to take it. That's the worst thing. So I get an ego bruise. So what? I had an interesting intellectual experience coming up with the concept. Just because it's not right for these people at this particular time doesn't mean it will never be right for anybody. There are different ways of looking at those things. And for me, I understood that the cost of not putting it out there was that very, very heavy what if that follows you around for the rest of your life. I didn't want that. So I sent it out. And actually, in the beginning, what happened was very strange. I wrote it during my maternity leave, not on purpose. I decided to have to take a few months off the second time I had maternity leave, because the first time I went back to work after a few days, and I clearly thought I could be Superwoman and I couldn't, and it was very, very hard. And so the second time round, I decided to make some space, and I took this 5 months of maternity leave. And that was just after I'd had this realization that I felt really trapped in my life, and I wasn't willing to carry on feeling that way. And so I made this space, and in that time, I had my second baby, and I had this wonderful summer pushing her along the seashore, thinking about life. And I got to thinking about this concept of freedom, because I didn't feel free at all. And I didn't understand why, because freedom had been something that I had always valued almost above anything else since I was a teenager. And I thought I'd always made decisions that would allow me to feel free. But obviously somewhere along the line, I got distracted by money, by, whatever else it was. And so what happened was I had this idea about freedom, and I was thinking, what is it? What happened? Why did I start to feel trapped? And how can I free myself? And I'm sure I'm not the only one that this is happening to. Who else is out there struggling with feeling trapped in the life that they have built, following the rules, doing what's expected of them, but not necessarily loving the reality of their everyday? And I discovered there were thousands of people in that situation, if not millions. And I talked to hundreds of them, actually, in the space of my maternity leave, to really understand this idea about freedom and how to feel free. Because when we feel free, that's when we're in flow, in the zone, when we can fulfill our true potential. It's really, really important. And so this idea just blossomed in this time that I had all this space in my day and space in my head that I didn't normally have, because I was working so hard. And it became a book proposal. I hadn't set out to write a book proposal, but it became one. And I sent it around to some friends, and my husband sent it to a friend of his who was actually an agent for novels. And she phoned me up and she said, "I love it. I want to represent you." And that kind of came out of the blue. And I hadn't, until that point, I'd not really even thought of myself as a writer, never mind as a legitimate, could be published author. And it was obviously an incredible confidence boost, and at the same time, totally terrifying, because what had just been a nice idea suddenly became a potential new reality. So at that point, I could have said, "You know what, it's fine. I don't want to do it." But that would have been totally crazy. And I just said, "Let's see how it goes." And we sent it out to many publishers. We ended up having more than the publisher I went with coming back to us wanting it, which was great. But there were also other publishers that didn't want it. Is what always happens. And you could at that moment go, "I'm useless. It's useless. What's the point?" And I don't want to send it to anybody else, because what if they say no as well? Well, the truth is, if they say no as well, that's just one more no. It doesn't change anything other than you haven't yet met the person who's going to say yes. And actually, Hay House was always my dream publisher. It's what I said to my agent in the beginning, and that's who it ended up being with. And I think life often works out that way. I'm just using the book proposal process as an example, and because for me, it's not something that I had always dreamed of and set all my hopes on. It came from wanting to feel a certain way in my life. And I think that's a really, really important place to start when you are trying to make a big change, to understand how is it that you want to feel in your life? How do you want your day to feel? What would it take for you to feel free, for you to fly free and fulfill your potential in life? And when you ask yourself that question, and then you understand, you can work back from there and understand a route that you might take that will get you to that point, you can be sure that there will be places along that route that are going to require you to deal with fear and to be brave and bold and try things that you don't know how to do, that you don't know what the outcome's going to be, and possibly fall down many times along the way. But it's part of the journey, and it's where the beauty lies. And it's very easy to say, "No, I'm too scared," but that you never find the joy and the glory of life by giving in that way. And of course, there are times when it's just too much, and my husband calls that a cosmic break. Sometimes, when you're really trying to do something, where you kind of told yourself that you're trying to do something, but nothing's really happening. And it's a version of procrastination. And I think we procrastinate for lots of reasons, but fear is absolutely the biggest one of them. But sometimes I think the universe steps in and says, "Now is not the time," or "You need a bit more work on your idea," or, "Wait a while and it's going to work," or just no, that is not the path for you. When things feel really, really hard and complicated, and it's a lot of work, and it's not just about the fact that you're worried what's going to happen to your ego if you try something. I call that, my husband calls that, a cosmic break. It's the universe just giving you a little hint that maybe you just need to shift your trajectory a little and try a different route. And often a very slightly different route isn't as terrifying as the one that you've set your sights on. And I think that's always really important to remember, that ultimately you get to choose, you get to change, and you get to choose. It's really, really important.
So how do you distinguish between these cosmic breaks and just from the negative voices?
It's difficult in the beginning if you're not used to giving any attention and value and trust in your intuition. One thing I discovered in the writing of Freedom Seeker is look at it, that uses the metaphor of a bird, which is kind of obvious for a book about freedom. But when we talk about the idea of a bird representing freedom, we talk about it being in a cage and escaping. But the truth is, that's just one part of the journey. getting out of that cage that you've built is just the beginning of everything else. And the truth is, when you open that cage door and you leave behind, you prepare to leave behind whatever it is that's been trapping you. You know, perhaps you've decided that you're going to change your job, or you're going to distance yourself from that person who's been treading all over your dreams. Whatever it is, that hard decision that you make, and then you step into this new version of your life, that is often the most terrifying time. I call it the emergence from the cage. And the reason is because you look up and then you can see the world for the first time in a while, and you realize it's massive. It's scary. You're tiny compared to this whole big wide world. Maybe you can't see anyone else flying around. It's just you. You feel alone. You feel like you're the only one. And you don't know how to fly. You don't know where to go. You feel like you don't know anything. You're just a baby bird all over again. And what I discovered when I was looking into the parallels between birds and humans, and how all the details of birds. I'd never been really interested in birds until I started writing this, and I was just getting bird signs coming out of it. It was crazy. Like, I'd open my door and there'd be like 1,000 bird feathers in front of my door, or I'd be really struggling with a question about the book, and I'd see someone would just come up to me with this massive feather tattoo on and tell me something that answered my question. It was a very bizarre experience. So I got really interested in birds and the messages that they have for us. And so I looked into the science of them, and I actually talked to an Oxford professor at one point about this, and looked into how birds navigate the world. And it's really, really fascinating. So birds use three things to navigate. They use landmarks, which are natural, like mountains and rivers, things like that. And they also use tall buildings, or man-made things. But they can only use that as a way to navigate the world if they have flown that path before. So they don't, they obviously don't have maps. They don't know there's a mountain there until they fly over that mountain, and then they know there's a mountain there. So first of all, they use landmarks, which the equivalent in a human is that we have access to knowledge and experience. We know certain things about the world that we couldn't know if we had not traveled a particular path. So even if we feel stuck, even if we hate our job, or we feel like we're totally wasting all of our time, there are things that we have learned along the way about life, about business, about careers, about people and relationships, whatever it is. There are things, knowledge and experience, that can serve us as we choose our path forward. So that's the first one. The second way that birds navigate is using sun and stars. So they use the sun, they look at the position of the sun and the stars, and they help. That information and that guidance that they get from the celestial bodies is incredibly valuable for them to help navigate. And in a human, that is information and guidance that we have access to with the wonderful blessing of the internet, with the people in our lives, with books that we can read, with courses that we can take, with podcasts that we can listen to. We have access to a huge amount of information and guidance from people we know or don't, from mentors, from teachers, from whoever. We have access to that information. That is the second way of helping us navigate. So there's certain things that we know because of the journey that we've traveled, but there are also things we don't know, but we can find out if we look. And then the third way that birds navigate is something that scientists aren't 100% sure about how it works, but they think that they have this internal mechanism called magnetoreception, which is kind of an inner compass. And of course, in humans, that is our intuition. It's our sixth sense. It's our inner knowing. And we are not trained, many of us, most of us, are not trained to give that intuition the respect and the attention that it deserves, because it's incredibly powerful, and it's just as important as a way to navigate life than the other two things. I mean, if you think about it, like how many people become a doctor because their dad was a doctor? That's basically their knowledge and experience and information and guidance, totally missing their intuition. They might be like, oh, I feel sick every time he talks about me going to medical school. At the age of 16, they're thinking about their whole future mapped out for them. Something's telling them it's wrong, but they don't know how to express it, because that is not how we're taught to make our decisions in life. If you only make your decisions based on intuition, it's really naive, because there is value in what you've learned along the way, and there is definitely value in looking to other people who've walked the path before you, because you can save a huge amount of time and a huge amount of pain by not repeating their mistakes. So it is a combination of those two things that's really, really important. But I think if you can learn to tune into your intuition, and there are many ways to do that, but getting quiet and spending time with yourself is definitely the most important and most valuable way of doing that. If you can really hone your intuition, and you can practice in really small ways, like you walk down the road and you like, shall I go left or right? And then you literally just stand there in the road and try to not make a decision in your mind and just let your body tell you. You might feel like drawn to the left, and so you walk to the left and see what happens. And you could spend an entire day just following your intuition, really stopping at every crossroads and asking your body to tell you, where should I go? And it sounds really woo-woo and weird, but if you start to do it and you can tune in that way, then you can use it to help you make decisions about anything big and small. And the reason I'm talking about intuition is because you asked about the voices in your head that, you know, just go on and on about how rubbish you are or not worthy you are, or how that's a terrible idea because you're going to look like an idiot if you try that thing. Those voices that really, really stop us from living our fullest life. If you're really tuned into your intuition and you're making decisions based on that, as well as the information and guidance and your knowledge and experience, you realize that those voices are just voices in your head. You don't have to pay attention to them. You can choose to act in a different way. And you can even talk to them and say, thank you for the information, but I'm not listening to you today, and go on and do your whatever you're going to do anyway. And once you learn to trust yourself, that you're going to sign that contract which says it's going to pay you loads of money and your life's going to be easier and it all sounds amazing, but there's just something that's stopping you putting that ink on the paper, that's your intuition. And it's really, really powerful, and it knows more. In many cases, I think it knows more than your mind knows. And it's an incredibly powerful tool in business as well, and in career choices and love. I mean, how often do we make bad choices about people, knowing deep in our guts that there's something not quite right, and then it does not turn out prettily in the end. So it's really, really important. And when you learn to trust that intuition, I think it's easier to be bold and brave and courageous, because if you check in just before you go and do something that feels terrifying, you know, yeah, I'm nervous about this, but it's a good nerves. I'm pushing myself. I'm trying something new. It's not going to kill me, and something good might come out of it. Your intuition is telling you it's okay. Go for it. If you can tune into your intuition, and every cell in your body is saying, do not get on that stage, well, maybe, public speaking isn't for you. It's a very powerful free tool that we all have access to.
Beth, you had mentioned earlier when you were doing all the research for your book, Freedom Seeker, that one of the things that you discovered was how people were getting in these states of flow. And this is not the first time that probably everyone's heard of it, but what does that mean, and how do we achieve that? Because I know everyone talks about flow and being in the present moment. So what could you give us today to help us sort of understand that better and put that into practice for ourselves?
Well, one thing I realized that kind of took me by surprise was something that I call the Dour Flight. So if you know about the Tao, this very ancient Chinese teaching, that when it's translated into English, it's quite difficult to understand, but it's very powerful. And it says the Tao that you can understand is not the Tao. And the best explanation I've ever heard of this, what the Tao is, which is translated as the way, which is in essence this kind of flow, is that if you imagine a blind person with a stick walking down the street, they're not tapping for where to walk. they're tapping for where to not walk. They're tapping for there's the curb. Okay, don't walk there. There's a lamppost. Don't walk there. And it's the place in the middle that allows them to proceed without obstacle. And thinking about this in the context of a bird in flight, it's that moment of gliding perfectly through the sky with all the forces in balance and really almost effortless. And the thing that I understood that really kind of disappointed me, but then made a lot of sense, was that it's impossible to live your life in that state the whole time. That is not what life on Earth is about, how it works, or any of those things. But those fleeting moments of almost absolute perfection, when everything is just easy and comes to you without any effort, and it's as if the universe is putting things in out to help you, and the answers that you need to know, and just everything is flowing. Or like I found when I was writing, sometimes it almost feels like you are channeling stuff. That for me is flow, and it's often described in the context of creativity. Somebody who's doing a painting and they're just completely lost in their painting. Like if you'd have to go up to them and like snap your fingers to get them to realize that you're trying to offer them a cup of tea. That is flow. And I think it's when we're accessing the deepest part of ourselves and bringing to the surface our essence, our deepest truth. And if you can live life from that place as much as you can, within the context of the fact that life is hard and you're not in control of everything, then the more you can access that place, the more joy you will find in your life, and the more you'll be able to bring your talents to the world. And so for me, that is what ultimate freedom feels like. But of course, a bird gets hungry and has to shoot off and find some food, or it has to rest in a tree. You don't spend your entire life in that mode, and nor would you want to, because it's only using a particular part of your brain, and there's a lot of other things in life that are to be enjoyed as well outside of that. But I think if you can really understand what being 100% in the moment feels like, and it doesn't have to be in creativity. It can be a moment with your child when you are looking deep into their eyes, both laughing your heads off, really sharing a special moment that you just like roll down a hill together or something. Those precious moments, if you can be 100% there and not anywhere else, those are the details that feel like a life that is being really, really experienced and appreciated. And those are the things that will be the memories. And when you apply that in your work, those are the things that will move you forward in your career and in a direction that is ultimately happy making for you, because you can't get in that place if you're not using your skills and talents and what's really, your calling. So it's hugely important.
Beth, if someone would like to connect with you and learn more about Freedom Seeker, how best could they go about doing that?
I think starting with reading the book Freedom Seeker is a really great way to get to know me and to get to know themselves, because it includes my story and lots of other people's really inspiring stories, plus transformational tools that will help people get to know themselves better. And you can get that from Amazon or from any good bookshop. And it's actually on Kindle sale at the moment. So you can get some transformational tools for under $2 if you're quick. So yeah, Amazon in any country. You can also connect with me via my website, which is bkempton.com, BETHKEMPTON.com, or on my company's website, dowhatyoulove4life.com, which is all letters, no numbers in that. And that is a place for lots of free resources and some of the courses that I teach to help people become braver and bolder and follow their path.
And Beth, what parting advice could you leave with us today?
This is, in this body, on this earth, you have one life. Try and tune into yourself, understand what you care about, and use that to make your decisions. If something feels too overwhelming, break it down, but always connect it back to what you really, really care about. And remember, you have a choice. It's up to you. Doing nothing is also a choice. So please choose whatever is going to make you happy.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much. And I want to let everyone know, too, that Beth has generously donated a copy of her book, The Freedom Seeker, that we'll be giving away. So if you would like an opportunity to win, visit the giveaways page at livingbeyondyourfears.com and submit your furniture form today. Beth, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, sharing your stories and helping us just to be a little bit more brave and a little bit more bold today. So I thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you cannot achieve everything, but you do have the God-given ability to achieve anything. So stay focused, out of fear, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, be well and peaceful. For more information on today's episode and guest, or for resources that will assist you in overcoming your fears, visit livingbeyondyourfears.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, where 3 times a week we move to a life beyond our fears.